Hello and welcome to Better Utah Broadcasts. I am Kyle Garahana. I'm hijacking Better Utah Broadcast today. Katie Matheson is behind the scenes. She is with us in spirit as well. Before we get into today's broadcast, just want to give you a quick reminder to tune in every Wednesday. Make sure you click a reminder to get reminded as well. Every Wednesday, 12:30, we'll have a Better Utah broadcast so you can enjoy these conversations that we have maybe over your lunch break. Next week, we will have, the topic will be women's issues. We'll let Katie handle that, and she will be discussing it with Dr. Susan Madsen from Utah Valley University. Today's topic, we will be discussing firearms.
Hey, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Move your hand up the microphone so it's not covering the transmitter.
Oh, okay. Is that better?
It should be.
Alrighty. On our show today, we have with us Ms. Terry Gilfillan, right, with
Yes.
Moms Demand Action. We are going to have a nice little discussion regarding guns and gun safety today. If you would not mind just giving yourself an introduction, maybe a little background about yourself for the people at home.
Yes, my name is Terry Gilfillan. I'm a mom, but I also am a rehabilitation counselor by profession. But I got involved in this organization when my daughter started college, and there was a shooting at a college in Oregon, and I just felt like I can't get angry anymore, so I've got to get involved, and so here I am.
Sweet. We appreciate you coming on and discussing this this topic. It's very important. So we'll just get into it. I think the first thing we wanted to discuss was gun safety as a whole, right? And so what does your organization define as maybe gun safety? What does that look like to you guys?
Yeah, gun safety means that gun owners are made accountable and responsible for their ownership of their firearms. Many of us are vehicle owners, and we are required to make sure vehicles are in good condition and operating safely in our communities. We're required to be trained and licensed to operate our vehicles. And when vehicle owners are irresponsible and operating their vehicles perhaps under the influence, we had a group called Moms Against Drunk Driving who stepped in and began educating the community about making sure people, the dangers of operating a vehicle under the influence and what can be done about that. And so they helped to influence lawmakers in making laws that made it more difficult for people to drive under the influence, and also manufacturers to start making cars safer for those times when people were in accidents and got injured. So that's kind of what we look at. We look at gun safety as when guns are not being used, that they are locked away and not available for anyone else to get a hold of them or use them. Gun safety means that guns are not sold to people who are known to be a danger to themselves or others. Gun safety means that people who buy guns are properly trained to use their firearms, and when expected to use to protect other human beings, they are specifically trained under stress for shooting in situations like active shooter situations. So we want to make sure that anyone who's going to participate in those particular kinds of situations, that they're specifically trained for that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Gun safety also means that our government is allowed to properly study the effects of gun violence.
What an idea.
Which is, in my opinion, a public health epidemic, and effectively track guns that are used in crimes. And we can talk about the archaic system we have, which was put in place by the behest of gun lobby. Gun safety also means all gun sales require individuals purchasing firearms must pass a background check with a waiting period. So that's what we mean by gun safety.
Awesome. I think that makes sense. I like the parallel to driving an automobile. I don't think a lot of people make that comparison, but I think it's a fair comparison as well. So I think that's a good point. And I think if I remember right, I saw something from you guys' Pennsylvania chapter that walked out of a safety meeting. I don't know if you saw this last night for something got voted down for background checks. So still seems like an uphill battle. Is that right?
It appears to be because for some unknown reason to us, when over 90% of the American public support this measure, we still have lawmakers who are not stepping up to the plate. So it's a real tough one for us. We feel like they're not responding to the will of the people.
Right.
So
It's a problem, right?
it is. It's a serious problem.
So what do you think? It seems like gun reform has taken so long to gain any momentum. Why do you think the reason is for that?
Gaining momentum is been a problem, and primarily because of the gun manufacturing lobby. It is quite influential in our government. Right now, they provide substantial funds to run candidate campaigns, and then they expect those candidates to vote against any gun safety legislation. Our organization doesn't have that kind of influence, but we're not giving up.
Good.
We want to make sure that our lawmakers are listening to us, and so we are giving them our voices by telephone, emails, you name it. I think the root of the problem right now is that we have terrible campaign finance laws that desperately need to be changed. However, I would note that as a grassroots organization that's only 5 years old, we have made gains in many states and state houses across the country with regards to gun laws that prevent domestic abusers from accessing firearms and preventing guns on educational campuses. What we are seeing now is that parents, lawmakers, and voters are waking up to the reality that until our gun laws are changed to better protect our communities, our children and family members are targets for an epidemic of gun violence. I would also like to add that communities of color have disproportionately been affected by the epidemic of gun violence for many years, and our society has been ignoring this issue for way too long. It's kind of sad that awareness and momentum only changes when affluent communities are affected, and they are being affected.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So maybe that leads to the answer to my next question. It seems like we've been making this argument for a long time, and it seems to die down after a while, after every school shooting. But this time, the argument seems to keep perpetuating. What do you think is different this time around?
I think what's different this time is that we have young people who have lived for the last 15 years going through school drills of, active shooter situations where they've had to figure out what they're going to do if somebody shows up with a gun.
Yeah.
And they're tired of it. Their lives are being threatened daily when they're just trying to get an education.
Right.
The other thing I think is really unique about today, as opposed to say 15 years ago, and Columbine, is that social media is really been a tool that these young people are able to and organize, and so I see it as extremely positive. Momentum has changed because these are the people that have to live in these communities as they grow up and have children, and so I'm hoping that they can see it. Things have changed dramatically since I was their age, and I can definitely see that the momentum is changing because of those issues.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good to see, right? Kids using social media for good.
For
right?
good.
I think they often get a lot of criticism for too overuse of social media, so I think it's awesome to see them using it for a good cause. Maybe to shift gears just for a little bit and bring it maybe as a local impact. What could you say or remark on as far as like the gun culture in Utah? It seems rather prevalent. I'm not too exposed to it myself. I'm wondering what your take is on it.
Well, I think Utah has a proud history of being self-sufficient and protective of their cultural heritage. Part of that heritage and culture involves living off the land, hunting and fishing to provide for their families and communities. Yeah. It is also a state that stands proud in its idea of protecting families as a constitutional right of self-defense. But what we also know is that as a family-friendly state who claims to value children and their nurturing and the safety within our communities, we want public policy that protects them from harm. So unfortunately, with those collection of values, we see some conflicting policy with regards to firearms here in the state of Utah. I personally don't know one parent who wants to hear that someone is walking through their child's school with an open carry assault weapon, but that's allowed in our state. Walking into a restaurant, grocery store, or in any public place where someone is openly carrying an assault rifle is unsettling because traditionally Utah is a community where we value neighborhood watch and brotherly, sisterly care and concern. I find that some of our policymakers are proud gun owners and have strong values of protecting Second Amendment rights of Utah citizens. I have no problem with that, but I do have a concern about the idea that every gun owner in Utah is somehow responsible, and any Utahn should be able to have access to firearms and carry them anywhere without training or safety concerns. That seems to fly in the face of the values Utahns have about community safety.
I would have to agree with that as well. And we'll come back to that a little bit. I also wanted to just touch on how guns play into the suicide rate. I think suicide is a big topic.
Yeah.
Gains a lot of momentum, especially around election time. How do guns play a role in the suicide rate?
Well, from 2013 to 2015, Utah's age-adjusted suicide rate was 21.1 per 100,000 people. Mm-hmm. This is an average of 578 suicides per year. And Utah has one of the highest age-adjusted suicide rates in the U.S. In 2015, suicide was the leading cause of death for children aged 10 to 17.
Gosh.
The rate of youth ages 10 to 17 dying by suicide in Utah has increased on an average of 22.8% each year from 2011 to 2015. Nationally, that rate has increased an average of 6%. So we see a real trend here in Utah, and we know our lawmakers have created a task force to try to address that issue. And I'm very proud to say that several of those members on the task force actually have addressed what I call the elephant in the room, which is firearms. Just over half all suicides in our state are completed with the use of firearms. That's an alarming fact. When we look at suicide attempts, firearms account for 85% of completed suicides. Wow. So there are a lot of suicide attempts, but you use a firearm, you have a much greater success rate.
Right.
Regional Director of American Foundation for Suicide Prevention here in Utah, Taryn Hyatt, many young people are suffering mentally, but they can get better if more access to mental health is provided. She believes that Utah's trends can be reversed. She said that she survived a number of suicide attempts when she was younger, and she's lived to see brighter days. And many people I meet who have had mental health issues when they were in their teens have repeatedly said to me that they are so grateful that they did not have access to firearms. So I just want to say that what we see in Utah is an alarming trend, but we also want to address the fact that firearms are readily accessible to young people. They did a survey where they asked students, do your parents have firearms? And the ones who answered yes said, do you know where they store them or where they're located? And they say, overwhelmingly said they knew where they could get a hold of them. So knowing that, we need to address the young people's access to firearms, period.
I think that you said it perfectly. Just another issue I wanted to get your take on is how it relates to gun safety as well. And we touched on it briefly earlier, is domestic violence situations and how maybe tighter gun laws can assist with those situations as well. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yes, we helped one of our representatives in 2017, to pass a domestic violence bill that would prevent those who have convicted of domestic violence from accessing firearms. So
that seems sensible to me.
But when it comes to gun violence against women, the United States is the most dangerous country in the developed world.
Yikes.
Domestic violence affects millions of women across the country, and guns in the hands of domestic abusers can turn abuse into murder. Indeed, the presence of a gun in a domestic violence situation makes it 5 times more likely that the woman will be killed. And the deadly mix of guns and violence exacerbated by America's weak gun laws. Women in the U.S. are 16 times more likely to be shot and killed than women in other developed countries. So what we're trying to address is the fact that when there is a known domestic violence abuser, that they are limited in their access to firearms.
Right.
Another concern that comes up is often that, oh well, we shouldn't have make people get permits because women who are domestically abused may need to get a firearm to protect
defend themselves. Right.
Well, the statistics are that that weapon will be used against her
Against them more often than
more
in
often
self-defense.
right. So we can't support that
No.
statistically.
All right, and then finally, just to kind of wrap up this portion of the Utah local debate, and then we'll move on. How do we keep the gun hunting culture, as we talked about in Utah? How do we kind of balance that with safer gun laws? I would imagine a lot of those people would be against more gun laws, right?
Well, I think that the argument that is against gun laws is typically under the guise of they're trying to take our rights away. And I feel like there's been this warped sense of what the Second Amendment is about, but there has never been in our organization or any other gun violence prevention organizations that I'm involved in have said that they want to limit someone's right to have access, to buy firearms. What we want to make sure is that dangerous people don't get access. And so closing the loopholes that we have in our gun sales, like private sales, we want to make sure that background checks go through all gun sales regardless. So I think that there is a good balance that can be met. It's not that we want to take people's guns away or we want to restrict their ability to purchase firearms. We just want to make it safer so that dangerous people don't get them, and that when they do purchase them, that they're properly trained on how to safely use them and use them in a way that others don't get access to them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, obviously, again, we go back to the car comparison as well, right? You have to go through getting a license, and
Right.
there's all these stoppages points to basically make sure you're driving responsibly. I think that a similar idea could be followed for gun safety as well. So I think that's sensible to me. And you brought up the Second Amendment point, which I was going to maybe play devil's advocate a little bit here and say, I see a lot of the backlash on the internet is, why are these people wanting to infringe on my constitutional rights? This is in the Constitution. It's the Second Amendment. It says I get a gun. Why don't you want me to have a gun? Why do you want to make it harder for me to have a gun? What would your response be to that?
Well, I guess I just would say in our organization, we've never advocated that we want to take anyone's rights away. But I think that the bottom line is that we're families. We have children who go to school. We go to theaters and movies, and we want to feel safe. So if we can come to an agreement about as a common good in our communities, this is where we need to have the conversation. It's not about restricting anybody's rights. We just want to make sure that our communities are safe.
Yeah, I think most people would agree with wanting to have a safe community as well. A lot of gun owners, that's their position on why they have a firearm, is to protect their family, right? And then also, I think just another, maybe skipping around a little bit, but a lot of arguments I hear as well from gun owners and saying, these are people that don't necessarily have guns or aren't necessarily educated or experienced with guns. Why should they be able to make decisions on guns? What would your opinion be on that?
Well, I don't know if that's a fair argument because we have lawmakers all the time making decisions about our lives in terms of making us safer, and they may not have the expertise at that moment, but to gain that expertise, why wouldn't they be offering that information? I mean,
Right.
I may not know how to operate an AR-15, but maybe that might be something I should learn about if someone wants to think that that's an important part of the conversation.
Right.
But I don't really know that that's what is the important part of the conversation. In my opinion, the important part is making sure our communities are safer. And
Yeah.
I do think that we as a society definitely have to weigh the safety concerns of our communities with individual rights. I mean, that's a
Right.
constant, that I think our Constitution has been that way, where we're constantly weighing those issues in terms of after 9/11.
Right.
They passed the Patriot Act. That's an infringement on our constitutional rights. But that was about safety.
Correct.
So
So
I
they said.
think, yeah, right. So really, that's what they said, and that's why they did it. So we have to constantly weigh those things, and so that would be where I would like to, sort of leave that, because I think we definitely have, we have to throughout. That's why we have a Supreme Court, to
Right.
kind of weigh the issues of individual rights versus, community, community rights. So.
I agree. I think that's a very good point. Let's shift maybe to just your organization directly. What have you guys done specifically recently as far as advocating for safer gun laws?
I can just give you this 6-page document of all the things that we've done,
Okay, 6 pages.
but I'll summarize it.
Yes,
How would that
please
be? So
We do only have 10 minutes left.
we've got numerous things. Since the organization started, the day after Sandy Hook, a mom started a Facebook page, and it went from an online group to an offline grassroots organization, and we have accomplished so much
That's awesome.
in the last 5 years. Let's see what I can.
Yeah, maybe some
Pull it.
highlights for us.
Yeah. So in 5 years, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America launched the goal of standing up to the gun lobby and proving once and for all that Americans support common sense gun safety. We have over 4 million supporters and volunteers like me in all 50 states, chapters in all 50 states.
That's awesome.
We've proven time and again that the gun lobby is no match for the passion of American mothers. 96 Americans die every day from gun violence. This is an absolute epidemic. We cannot continue at this. It's unacceptable. So we're here fighting to keep families safe and try to improve our communities for gun safety. Since 2013, 25 states and the District of Columbia have enacted bills that strengthen the laws that keep guns away from domestic abusers. We've expanded background checks in nearly half of Americans that live in states that require criminal background check on every handgun sale.
Good.
We've stopped NRA-backed bills such as Stand Your Ground in 29 out of 34 states. We've stopped the NRA's number one state priority, which is permitless carry, in 25 out of 30 states. We've also defeated bills that allow guns in schools, K through 12, in 30 out of 31 states. And we're just about saving lives, and we just want to make sure that that continues. So those are some of the we also started a campaign with private businesses to keep guns out of their stores.
As far as like selling them? As far as employees having them?
As far as people walking in with their open carry
Gotcha.
firearms. Starbucks, Target, Chili's, they've all posted on their doors that they don't allow open carry in their stores. We're working on other campaigns for that. So We also helped push Facebook to stop unlicensed sales on their platform.
Oh,
That was in 2016, and we've launched a gun safety program where we teach people how to be responsible gun owners in making sure that their guns are not accessible to their children.
you guys are busy.
Yeah.
You guys are doing a lot. That's awesome. We appreciate your work. And maybe just to kind of dovetail off of that, what is maybe some goals of the national group that may, and then the Utah chapter, and like maybe some differences
Sure.
for the two?
Nationally, we are looking at checking, of course, background checks on all gun sales. But nationally, we're currently working on a bill that's going through Congress called Conceal Carry Reciprocity.
Okay.
I think that's what it is. I'm sorry. I don't,
Yeah, we're getting nods in the.
Conceal carry reciprocity, and that's very dangerous because we have some very safety conscious states who have passed universal background checks, who have made concealed carry have to get a permit and training, et cetera, et cetera. And we just feel like that's taking away states' rights. We have a political party that has always claimed, states' rights, but
Right.
now they seem to be wanting to pull this in and say, hey, well, if it's okay to conceal carry without a permit in Nebraska, they should be able to move to California and still do that. So I think that's taking away the will of the people, and we feel like that's pretty dangerous. So that's what we're working on a national level. We're also just started a campaign of Throw Them Out, which is basically targeting lawmakers who are taking lots of dollars from the gun lobby. We are going to stand up to them and say, we're going to work for your opponent, or whoever is standing up against the gun lobby.
Right. I like it.
So.
That's good. You guys are busy.
Oh, and here in this state, we are certainly launching our gun safety program. We are working. We just helped to defeat the expansion to stand your ground here in Utah.
Right, yeah.
And so we work with legislators on bills like that to help suicide prevention, domestic abuse, and just targeting, population targeting. So they call it the hate crimes.
Right, exactly. Cool. Also, just one thing I was kind of curious, and maybe you don't know the answer to this. Has there been like a member increase that you've noticed since the Parkland shooting?
Yes.
Like probably significant? Or?
Well, we have over 4 million members nationwide, but after Parkland, within like 3 weeks, we had 175,000 to
like added to the 4 million?
Yes, it just in a couple of weeks. And then here in Utah, we had about 1,800 prior to that, and now we have about 2,500.
That's awesome.
So it is. It's I think people are finally saying enough is enough.
I think so too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Real quick, we'll just touch on a few school safety topics before we have to go. I know there's been a lot of talk about arming teachers in schools and whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. I was interested to get your take on that.
Well, we know that there's no evidence that arming teachers will protect children at this point. To the contrary, research indicates that arming teachers will make children less safe. This is why school safety experts, including teachers, school resource officer, and law enforcement organizations oppose that policy. If lawmakers want to prevent school shooting, they must adopt proactive solutions to keep people with dangerous histories from getting guns in the first place. So we are supporting the red flag laws. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
I'm not. What is that?
The red flag laws are those that allow a police officer or family member to report someone that they feel is dangerous and potentially a danger to themselves or someone else from accessing firearms.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So they can be put on a list.
I think that's a good idea.
So arming teachers ignores that research that having more firearms in a place actually makes children less safe. The American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association, the two largest organizations of educational professionals in the nation oppose allowing guns in school.
Interesting.
Arming civilians untrained in active shooting situations have never been proven to save lives. It's not an effective way to stop active shooters. The FBI found that in 160 active shooter incidents, there was only one successful armed civilian intervention, and that civilian was a highly trained U.S. Marine.
Oh, so we just need a bunch of highly trained U.S. Marines. in our
Apparently,
schools. Okay.
Civilians with guns in an active shooter situation effectively puts the law enforcement officers who are trying to de-escalate the situation in danger. You know, it delays their response because they're attempting to determine who's
the good guy with the gun, right?
Exactly. And it also puts more individuals at risk because there's more bullets being fired.
Friendly fire. Right.
Arming teachers would burden schools with the increased cost of insurance and security, let alone proper training costs for many teachers. And most teachers I know say, I don't want to be a cop. If I wanted to be a cop, I would have
Right.
become a cop.
I think that's a pretty good argument that gets overlooked a lot as well. And then one maybe just final question as far as school safety. And then in regards to these people that are maybe extreme gun owners or a little over enthusiastic about their gun ownership, what language do we use to talk to them? What angle should we take? How do we reach these people to have a solid conversation so we can?
Well, I think first of all, to fix this problem, we need to coalesce as a community around the idea that our lawmakers need to be accountable to us, to the people. We need to make sure people register to vote and, let their lawmakers know that this is something that concerns them. I think we need to educate people, like those gun enthusiasts.
Right.
We need to just educate them to keep their firearms safe and locked up. We need to talk about the importance of being trained and to safely operate. You know, I think a lot of people who are gun enthusiasts maybe are trained, but we also know there are a lot of people out
That are
there
not. Yeah.
who are just getting firearms because,
That's cool.
or they, they're gonna
It's their right.
they're gonna do something with it,
Yeah, right.
something nefarious. But we just need to be aware that not everybody is got that in their head that they're going to be, a responsible gun owner. We just need to be aware. We live amongst people who have dangerous ideas and thoughts. And what we will not do as an organization is debate the gun lobby's meaning of the Second Amendment. We do feel like there's been a little warped, the idea of, guns everywhere for everyone, no questions asked.
Yeah. It seems
That doesn't seem a very safe approach to our society.
Yeah.
But our goal is and always will be to make communities safer by helping to prevent gun violence in ways that are proven to help. So our movement is about saving lives from gun violence. We are committed to fighting common sense gun safety in our communities and businesses, and background checks for all gun sales, training requirements to safely operate firearms. Those are just common sense. And that's what we're about.
I think those are good points. I think we're just about out of time. So just one more question, I guess. How do people find and support your organization? What can they do to support you guys?
I don't know if you can see this, but we have
She brought
Text.
materials.
text ACT to 644-33, or our organization is Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. There's a website at the bottom, momsdemandaction.org. And for our research arm, it's Every Town for Gun Safety, and it's just everytown.org.
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Again, this has been Kyle Gary Hanna for Better Utah Broadcast. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 12:30. We'll be discussing women's issues with our guest, Dr. Susan Madsen. We'll have Katie take over that one. She'll be back then. Until then, we'll see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.